pocket change. It's something most men used to carry with them all the time. I can remember always having some change on my dresser waiting to be placed in my pants pocket each morning. Women had and may still have pocketbook change, but for men it was pocket change. And that, of course, was when most modest transactions were conducted using cash. That's not the case anymore, of course, as today most of us use credit or debit cards for purchases. The money we do carry with us, though, can convey various messages. Some of those appear on the face of the coins or paper bills themselves. I read that the first official coin minted and circulated in the United States was what's referred to as the Franklin cent, because it was supposedly designed by Benjamin Franklin. It's also called the Fugio cent, if I'm pronouncing it correctly, because it's inscribed with the Latin word fugio, meaning I flee or I fly. It has a sundial with sun rays beaming down from the sun above it, perhaps intending the message to be that time flies. By the way, that 1787 penny also had another odd inscription on it. It said, "Mind your business." Now that, yeah, I'm not sure what that was all about. It may be good advice, but it seems a little odd for a coin, unless it sounds almost like something Franklin would come up with as a way to encourage merchants to care for their business ventures or something like that. The coins in our country today have inscriptions on them that we probably don't pay all that much attention to most days. Among the words we see on our coins is liberty, affirming our being a nation that ascribes to freedom for all, even if we haven't always met that goal and, in fact, failed miserably in the past. Our coins also say, "In God we trust." That language was added in the 1950s during the Red Scare, when our country grew fearful of the spread of communism and officially atheist culture. The phrase, in God is our trust, actually appeared on some U.S. coins during the Civil War, but it wasn't until 1956 that Congress approved what we see on our money today. So the question is, do we trust God? Do we as a nation trust in God? Our money says so, but do our actions and attitudes? What was on the face of coins was part of a discussion in today's scripture we heard a moment ago from the Gospel of Matthew. Jesus is confronted by two groups of Jewish religious leaders with a question. Now, it was common for Pharisees and other teachers of the law to debate the meaning of Scripture. They sharpened their understanding of the Torah by posing hypothetical questions to one another that forced them to wrestle with passages of the Bible in order to uncover their truths. Jewish rabbis continue that tradition to this day. It's kind of what we as United Methodists do when we employ the so-called Wesleyan quadrilateral, looking at Scripture through the lenses of tradition, reason, and experience. In today's gospel lesson, however, the religious leaders were not engaging in a genuine debate about the Bible in order to learn more. No, they had one motive in mind, and that was to trap Jesus with a clever question, leaving him between a rock and a hard place. Matthew explicitly names their evil intent, and it becomes clear that that's what's going on because of who is doing the asking. One group inquiring was made up of disciples of the Pharisees, laypersons who led the synagogues and carefully studied the law, zealously guarding it from being broken. The other inquisitors confronting Jesus were Herodians, so named because of their support for rulers of the house of Herod, propped up by the Roman overlords, and so they didn't want to do anything to upset the apple cart and bring punishment from Rome to their people. In contrast, the Pharisees were Jewish purists and definitely not loyal to the Roman pagans. So it was very odd that these two groups had gotten together. Their shared enmity toward Jesus seems like the only explanation. So they come up to Jesus and they try to flatter him, but it's a ruse. They say they know he's sincere and teaches the truth about God and shows no preference, treating them all the same. They might as well have said he was handsome and well-dressed and has a nice personality. They're just setting him up for what was to follow. The trap they set for Jesus is this question: is it lawful to pay taxes to Caesar or not? Now, it may seem benign to us. Of course you pay your taxes. We may not like paying taxes, but we do so because, one, it's the law and the consequences of tax evasion are pretty stiff, and two, most of us can see the benefits of living in this country which operates because of the revenue collected through income taxes in addition to other means. Things were very different, however, for first century Jews who were under the boot of a ruthless foreign government. The vast majority of Jews, including the Pharisees, despised paying taxes to the Romans occupying their promised land. The Herodians, on the other hand, unlike the Pharisees, supported the status quo of Herod's son as rulers, and with them the Romans, and willingly paid taxes to Caesar to keep the peace. So here you have these two groups with opposite viewpoints on the issue of loyalty to Rome, pressing Jesus for an answer. They figured they had him trapped no matter what he said. If he said not to pay the taxes, well, then he could be charged with sedition, as he would seem to be rebelling against the Roman government. If, on the other hand, he said they should pay the tax, then he would be seen by the people as a Roman sympathizer and also as a poor example of a pious Jewish rabbi. Here's where what was imprinted on the coins of that day comes into play. The tax was generally paid with a Roman coin called a denarius, which was about a day's wage. The coin had imprinted on it the face of Tiberius, the Roman emperor, along with the inscription, Tiberius Caesar, august son of the divine Augustus and high priest. For the Jews, at least like those like the Pharisees who tried to remain pure in their faith practice, such words were offensive, even blasphemous, as was the image on the coin of the emperor calling himself divine. If Jesus were casual about the use of that coin, he might be labeled an idolater. So, when they ask Jesus if it's lawful to pay taxes to Caesar, they know full well they're putting him in a tight spot. They believe they boxed him in on both sides. But this is Jesus, and they were wrong. He sees through their sly tactics, even calling them hypocrites. Jesus doesn't step into their trap. Instead of answering their question, he asks them to show him the coin used to pay the tax. They hand him a denarius, which means they have the very coin most of them find offensive. Jesus asks, whose head is this and whose title? Now, you see what he's referring to there? It's the two offensive things we were just talking about, the emperor's image and his claim to divinity. In other words, seeing the trap placed before him, Jesus avoids it by forcing these religious leaders to own up to their own hypocrisy. For in their very hands is the coin, which is both offensive to the Jewish people and affirms allegiance to Rome. The religious leaders acknowledge that it's Caesar's image and title on the coin. And then Jesus says, give to Caesar what is Caesar's, and to God. Give to Caesar what is Caesar's, and to God what is God's. Matthew says they were amazed by Jesus' reply and walked away. Probably not because they were confused, but frustrated, because Jesus had deftly slipped out of their trap. So, what is the takeaway for us in our day and time? Jesus prevailed over the hypocritical religious leaders, but surely there's more of a message here for us than just that. We find it in what Jesus says at the end of this passage about giving to Caesar and giving to God. On its face, it appears these words were mean that we're caught between two opposing forces, each looking to us for loyalty. And to some extent we are. But it's a little complicated by the fact that when he says, give to Caesar what is Caesar and to God what is God's, Jesus doesn't specify where the line is drawn. That's what we want from Jesus, probably. I mean, if you think about it, we kind of like him to clarify for us. Give us a nice, neat, clear line, identifying what God expects from us, leaving all of the rest of it, all the rest of the stuff of our lives, to hold on to and use as we want, right? If we're honest with ourselves. But here's the thing. Maybe Jesus intentionally didn't draw such a line, expecting us to wrestle with the decision of where to draw it ourselves. There's a story about a Wednesday evening gathering at a church during which, as the story is told, a very wealthy man rose to give his testimony. I'm a millionaire, he said, and I attribute it all to the rich blessings of God in my life. I can still remember the turning point in my faith like it was yesterday. I had just earned my first dollar, and I went to a church meeting that night. The speaker was a missionary who told about his work. I knew that I had only a dollar bill, and I had to either give it all to God's work or nothing at all. So at that moment, I decided to give my whole dollar to God. I believe that God blessed that decision, and that is why I am a rich man today. As he finished, it was clear that everyone had been moved by the man's story, but as he took his seat, a little old lady sitting in the pew leaned over and said, "Wonderful story. I dare you to do it again." Where do you draw the line between what to give to earthly concerns and what to give to God? It's a question of faith. It's a question of faith. Martin Luther said, "I have held many things in my hand and have lost them all, but whatever I have placed in God's hands, that I still possess. Give to Caesar what is Caesar, and to God what is God's." The truth is that it all belongs to God, as the psalmist reminds us. The earth is the Lord's and all that is in it, the world and those who live in it. In fact, the Greek verb used in the gospel quote of Jesus about giving to Caesar and to God actually means to give back. To give back. So maybe Jesus is saying to the religious leaders who handed him the coin, give back to Caesar this insignificant coin that bears his image, and give back to God what belongs to God, namely everything and everyone in the world. The earth is the Lord's and all that is in it, the world and all and those who live in it. It's a matter of coming to recognize what Martin Luther did, that the best place for safekeeping everything of real value is God's hands. What we try to grasp with our own hands is elusive and usually lost from our grip sooner or later. As I noted earlier, the coins and currency of our nation proclaim that in God we trust. Now, I believe that all of us participating in this worship service trust in God to some degree, or we likely wouldn't be here or watching this service from elsewhere. We are drawn to God in some significant way. That's why you're here. The question, I suppose, is how committed are we to God and God's mission and God's church? Next week is Stewardship or Commitment Sunday, but for the past 3 weeks, including today, we've been preparing for it by sharing testimonies about the ministry areas of our church which receive the largest funding. Today, we focused on missions and particularly the wonderful outreach ministry room in the inn, and what a great testimony that was. Our church demonstrates its level of commitment to caring for homeless persons in our city by opening our church building every Wednesday night for 4 months, and by our members volunteering to help out in various ways in the mission center downstairs to welcome warmly our special overnight guests. Our commitment is reflected in these actions by our church as an organization and by individual members of the congregation who give of their time in this way. It's measurable and it's impactful. The same is true of our financial commitment to the church. It's obviously measurable and it's impactful. The amount that each of us pledges is not made public, but each of us will know what level of commitment we make for the year ahead. And therefore, we might ask ourselves, are we giving to God's church mere pocket change or something more substantial and meaningful? Only we can determine what that might be. One measure encouraged in the scriptures is tithing. Literally 10%. But if one doesn't yet feel up to that level, a pledge of a lesser percentage reflects a faith commitment and a deep trust in God. There's a story of a missionary who heard the knocking on the door of his hut and discovered a young boy holding a large fish in his hands. The boy said, "You taught us what tithing is, so here, I've brought you my tithe." As the missionary gratefully took the fish, he asked the boy, "If this is your tithe, where are the other 9 fish?" At this, the young boy beamed and said, "Oh, they're still in the river. I'm going back to catch them now." That's faith. That's faith. That's trusting in God to provide, giving God the first fruits. I can tell you from personal experience that my wife Kristen and I have felt blessed and cared for by God over the years as we've committed to tithing to the church. And I'm including our lives together before I became a pastor. Oh, we've had some lean times now and then, such as early in my ministry when I was a student pastor, but we always felt that God met our needs. And so our faith grew as we trusted in and committed to God. We've been blessed by our tithe commitment to God and God's church. It has brought us much peace and joy. You and I give, however, not to get back a blessing, but to give back in response to God's love, a boundless love revealed in and through Jesus Christ, a love unimaginable in its scope, a love revealed most profoundly by Jesus' sacrifice on the cross. So I encourage all of us to consider prayerfully how we can best show our trust in God through our support of this church in the year ahead. Amen.